Now we are recording. Welcome today, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Lasecki. Today our topic is Next Generation Workforce Certification, Innovative Tools for Educating and Upskilling Supply Chain Technicians. It's my pleasure to introduce our lead presenter, Steve Harrington. Steve, you can go ahead and click to your next slide there. Steve, just a second. I'm going to ask you to unmute to make sure we've got audio connection there.
There we go.
Looking good. Thank you, Steve. Now,
good morning,
colleagues, before we get started, I've got one thing to say about Steve. Steve once said that customers have the right to life, liberty, and online delivery in one day. So you said that, Steve. I thought I would just remind our audience of that. I'm going to turn off my video and turn over the presentation to you. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody, or I don't know if it's afternoon in some parts of the country. My name is Steve Harrington. I'm the industry liaison for the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. Co-presenting with me today will be Mr. Neil Reddy, CEO of the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council, and Mr. Paul Perkins, President of Amatrol. In terms of an overview of the presentation, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the National Center, who we are not, provide some history, provide some occupational context, and then talk about our role in the development of the certification that we're discussing today. Mr. Neil Reddy will be presenting information from MSSC's viewpoint on the Certified Technician Supply Chain Automation certificate program that's moving forward in a neat and aggressive way. And Paul Perkins will be talking about the SkillBoss logistics device and Amatrol's role in the next generation type of certification. Mike talked a little bit about some elements related to the webinar as it relates to chat, so I won't go over that. But the webinar is set up for 45 minutes, which will be about 40 minutes of Q&A, but we've allocated up to 40 minutes for presentation. And then at the back end, we've allocated about 15 or 20 minutes for Q&A. So actually we'll be live running for about an hour. After the webinar, Mike talked about the fact that the video link and the presentations will be sent out to everybody in attendance. Immediately following the webinar will be a survey from the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. We need that sort of data in order to meet some compliance items with the National Science Foundation, and we like to find out what's going on out and about in the community. So with that said, I want to introduce this slide, and it's an overview of supply chain management, and it's quite involved. I have heard before that there are 155 career pathways in the supply chain. You have to have lived under a rock in the past 4 months if you haven't heard about the supply chain, which has been front and center in the national dialogue in many ways. And you look at all the varying occupations and things that are involved in supply chain management itself. I show this slide for one particular reason, because the work of the National Center for Supply Chain Automation is not in supply chain management. Supply chain management is taught in universities and in schools all across the country, and is a well-established program, well-established education, and it's not what we are involved with. We are involved in the world of facilities and engineering in our supply chain automation technician. It's the hands-on skills that an individual would need in order to take care of the automated equipment and systems which are part of today's 21st century supply chain. We are funded by the National Science Foundation under STEM. We have partner schools nationally. Our role is to develop resources, and we seek industry's input in developing all of those resources. And because we are NSF funded, what we develop and what we have posted up on our website is no cost to anybody that has an interest. We have a strong and robust industry leadership team who helps guide and drive our mission as we go forward. And we are not involved in student education. Schools are involved in student education, and some of our partners are involved in student education, but it is not something that we do. If you look at this particular model, the Tompkins supply chain model, courtesy of Jim Tompkins from Tompkins and Associates, a leading logistics consulting firm. These are the elements of the supply chain. If you look toward the middle of the slide, you see make, move, and store. Make is manufacture, move would be the transportation, trucks, trains, planes, ships, things of that nature, and store would be where the today's 21st century automated warehouse is located, and the shipping and receiving and all of the value-added services that exist in today's warehouse environment. Our original partner colleges, when the center was first funded, were Norco, Tacoma, Sinclair, and Oakton, and Jefferson Community College. So we had presence in 5 different states across the country. Since our initial funding, some of our partners have evolved a little bit. Tacoma and Jefferson have dropped off, and we've added Central Piedmont Community College out of Charlotte, North Carolina. During the formation of the center, we had a strong, as I mentioned earlier, a strong and robust industry leadership team. And these are some of the industry entities, along with some of the other organizations that helped us formulate our mission, formulate our direction, and guide us. What's missing from here are 2 key players. One of those is Dollar Tree, and a lot of thanks go out to Karen Ryan and Phil Jilks with Dollar Tree and the support of the National Center, and Liz Richards, CEO of Mahida, Material Handling Equipment Distributors Association, have been invaluable partners to the center's work. So here's the mission and objectives of the center. I won't go too much into detail here, but at a high level, our role is to increase the supply of highly qualified supply chain automation technicians. Our work with MSSC and Amitral and certification falls underneath the 4th objective on the right. You can see that there. And that also helps feed back into our objectives 1 and 3. But this is the focus of our work. In terms of the occupation that we support and that we advocate for and that we research, do research on and develop resources around is the occupation of term supply chain technician, also called automation technician or multi-craft technician. Some people call it just technician. There's lots of different names for this particular occupation, but there's you see the industry definition shown on the screen. And I think the most important aspect of it, of this particular slide, is to show you that all of the skills that are needed by somebody who works in today's modern supply chain in the 21st century warehouse. It's the intersection of traditional industrial mechanics with information technology. I think the field of mechatronics, is a good way to describe it, which is mechanical, electrical, and computerized motor controls. At any rate, it gives you a feel for the challenges that abound in getting a technician skilled to work in today's supply chain. I shared this particular slide because it shows you an organic career pathway from one of our industry partners. And again, not a supply chain management focus. It's an automation or facilities engineering focus, but it shows the progression of a technician from a tech trainee into a technician at varying levels, skill levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then through the varying opportunities that exist. This particular occupation, it has entry-level wages in the $40,000 range, and the regional facility maintenance manager sort of positions can make $150,000 a year or more. And there's lots of jobs in the middle here that pay $75,000, $80,000, $85,000 a year. And so it shows the career pathway, and it's the reason that NSF has funded the National Center. The National Center, the National Science Foundation through the ATE program is focused on technician education and technician education with career pathways that pay living wages at a foundational level. One of the roles of the National Center is develop resources, and one of the things we've done is develop, with industry's help, we had 6 industry authors help us. We developed the Introduction to Automated Warehouse, an e-textbook, which is available in iBook and PDF. There's a link on this particular slide, which you will receive the slide deck after the presentation, but it's a survey course for career awareness outreach, to raise the awareness. Students need to be aware that careers actually exist in the supply chain. That you need to have a feel for what the supply chain is before they're ever going to go into any given individual occupation. This iBook is interactive and has interactive elements, and there's also a instructor's manual to support that, which has been developed along with lab exercises. So the center's done a lot of educational collaboration over the years, and the work we do, again, not supply chain management, not in a business department, but in some schools that are involved in some form of industrial technologies. It can be integrated systems. I touched on mechatronics already, robotics and automation, integrated systems, or traditional industrial maintenance. And focused on educating technicians, and they must have either have or planning to have training labs so that folks can learn the hands-on skills behind this occupation. The National Center looks for champions, is not interested in academics who are retired in place. We need people that are willing to work with us to drive this mission forward. That's true in our work, and that's true as it relates to the adoption of the certification program. The National Center also, through its work, its workforce development forums, has, we did 16 different workforce development forums with industry and educators in 14 states. Through all of that work, we did over 60 different colleges and technical schools were involved. We physically visited about 34 different schools. As a result of that, we've compiled a list of schools across the country that educate technicians. We have that list posted up on our website, and there's a link on this slide to access that. This is a slide that just gives you a view of the states that have a concentration of supply chain related activity. Basically, the takeaway is the darker the state on the slide, the more activity there is in the supply chain. This is a slide that Swisslog shared with us, and it gives you a feel for what's going on in today's automated 21st century warehouse. As you drive along the highway, you might see that big building on your right. Looks pretty plain on the outside. You have no idea what's going on the inside of those big logistics buildings. This is a sample of many of the technologies that are involved. And there's everything from shuttle systems to AGV cranes, ASRS systems, goods-to-person systems, and things of that nature. The investment inside of one of these buildings can be anywhere from a low end of $5 million up to a high end of $200 million in automated equipment and systems. So our role in the development of certification, we did some initial research, and there was a gap identified that there was no nationally industry validated certification that was nationally portable and ANSI ISO accredited in this space. We had shared that with our partners, and through that process, an MOU was developed between MSSC and MHI for the initial development stages. The National Center's role was to be a convener of industry experts. We played that role, gathered all of that data, and then ended up sending that on to MSSC for their development of first the draft, then the actual finalized industry validated skill standards. Our people that were involved in our initial research were large consumer good retailers, package shippers, people who handle the boxes, and of course the automated system suppliers. The people from the National Center from our industry leadership team were involved in the validation of the skill standards, were involved in the validation of the assessments, and then the design of the SkillBoss logistics device that Paul Perkins will be talking about shortly. We've also been integrally involved in a detailed review of the e-learning, which is tied to this whole system to make sure that it all crosswalks. Going forward, our role is one in which we will be raising awareness about the certification. The National Center is an honest broker. We have no financial benefit in the success or lack of success of what we're working on. This is a quick slide, a little bit of industry data. It shows you the growth of e-commerce over the past 10 years. And you can run this back all the way to 20 years ago when e-commerce was first starting as catalog businesses. But something interesting between 2019 and 2020 was the initial forecasted growth in e-commerce activity in the US. This is total US retail sales, the growth of $85 billion. And that is quite a challenge that as the paradigm shifts more and more toward e-commerce, is the business used to be done in the logistics world one carton at a time and one pallet at a time. Now it's being done one each at a time. So that is such significant growth as it grows. And the 13% on that bar is 13% of total US retail sales. And that was a forecast growing into this year, but what happened was COVID. And COVID has rocked the world, as we all know. And what's going on is there's a tsunami of e-commerce that's occurring. And then according to UBS, a international banking and financial services firm, 25% of all US retail spending will be online by 2025, which will force about 100,000 bricks and mortar stores in the US to close. And when those stores close, as they close, so you estimate about 20,000 a year. The trend going into this year had been 7,000 or 8,000 a year. In 2019, 12,000 stores closed. But this is really a tipping point for the bricks and mortar world. And all of that business is moving online into today's automated 21st century warehouses. So this quote was from the Wall Street Journal, 6/30/2020. And this is an example of a number of 20 different firms who've announced bankruptcy in the past few months. And the list will go on from there. My friend Leo Reddy, who calls himself a preppy, said that he was pretty broken up about Brooks Brothers. Leo, I give you a comment. It looks like a firm's coming in, an Italian firm to rescue Brooks Brothers. So now your preppy look will have a little bit of an Italian feel to it. So CB Richard Ellis came up with this particular metric. Now, if you remember that initially it was forecast, so $85 billion additional e-commerce in 2020 was initially forecasted. Now it's even greater. They're looking at 120, 140, $150 billion in e-commerce. CB Richard Ellis' statistic is that for every $1 billion in e-commerce sales, there's an estimate of about an additional, this is over and above normal, 1.25 million additional square footage of additional distribution space. And that's a huge driver that's driving an epic demand for skilled technicians as we go forward. And one other thing that's going to be occurring is that the federal government is going to be putting a lot of money out there for skills retraining as it relates to the closure of the retail sector, as well as the workforce reductions in other industries. With that said, I said I'm the industry liaison for the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. If you have an interest in our industry leadership team meeting on August 12th, please send me a message. There's my email. And with that, Neil, why don't you share your screen with us?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for all the work you've done. I just wanted to take a moment here to recognize the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. I think you all are familiar with the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council. We're an industry-led nonprofit national certifying body, and we operate under the highest level of third-party accreditation. And we maintain the very highest levels of quality assurance. And we actually are accredited under ISO standard 17024. And we've been accredited both by the American National Standards Institute and by our current accrediting body, International Accreditation Services Group, IAS. And I mention that because when I say I want to express my special thanks to the National Center for Supply Chain Automation, particularly Steve and your full team there. We could not have developed these three certifications without NCSCA. And we go through this very rigorous process of first sitting down with subject matter experts that do this for a living, and they define, identify, and validate the standards. And we use these standards to go on to use them as a blueprint for our assessments. We also use their assistance in the development of both the e-learning and hands-on SkillBoss device, which Paul Perkins will be talking about. and also enabling input from industry and career path demand. So what is the demand in this, this occupation? So with that said, I just want to express my thanks again to Steve and NCSCA. We consider ourselves the national gold standard, and what we mean by that is we maintain the highest levels of quality assurance, as I mentioned, and part of that under our ISO accreditation goes back to our early initiative years. We were nominated under the National Skills Standards Act back in 1998. We were federally mandated to work with all sectors of manufacturing originally to develop our Certified Production Technician program, which was probably one of the largest private-public workforce initiatives. We involved over 700 corporations. They in turn worked with us and provided us about 4,000 workers to develop our initial production standards, which had to be industry-wide core competency standards. Our standards were federally endorsed by the National Skills Standards Board in 2001 when we were originally incorporated. To give you an idea of our growth over the years, we started out as a self-sustaining certifying body in 2006. After 7 years of development, we had about 16 testing centers. I'm happy to mention today that we have over 2,700 trained instructors. We have close to 1,780 authorized test sites in all 50 states. And most of our customers are community colleges, career centers, high schools. We also have a network of about 75 field reps in all 50 states. And again, I'll reemphasize our ISO 17024. And ISO standards are really sort of an internal management system that we're required to form that our auditors review every year, and the application is very rigorous. And for example, we're required every other year to maintain our standards. So it's not uncommon for us to work with over 100 subject matter experts every other year to maintain our certification programs. We're also required to perform an item analysis every year for our assessments. So there's a lot that goes behind the scenes with maintaining the highest international standard, which is 17024. In terms of our existing certifications, we have, as I mentioned, our Certified Production Technician, which is the CPT. That's combined with our latest, last year we announced our Certified Production Technician Plus, our hands-on certification that sits on top of that. We have our Certified Logistics Technician certification to prepare people for material handling occupations. And our Certified Forklift Technician that we recently launched at the end of last year. And of course, today's presentation, our webinar, is going to be around our newest certifications, Certified Technician Supply Chain Automation. Again, this collaboration, and again, this has taken many years. Our partnership with NCSCA has been fantastic. We also worked with Material Handling Industries. We've worked very closely with Amatrol, who's been our partner in most of our certifications for many years, going back 14 years at least, and the Material Handling Equipment Distributors Association, MHEDA. So the CTSCA, just looking at the formal definition, is a person who installs, operates, supports, upgrades, or maintains the automated material handling equipment and systems to support the supply chain. And as a national certifying body, we have a very comprehensive system for all of our certifications. And again, this goes back to our quality assurance. So again, the first step is industry-defined, nationally validated standards. We have courseware, we have instructor training, we have our assessments, our credentials themselves, and we also maintain a registry of all of our certificates and our instructors and all of our assessment centers. So the CTSCA is made up of 3 certifications. The first is equipment maintenance, maintaining equipment systems. The second is the equipment repair, installing, modifying, troubleshooting, and repairing equipment systems. The CTSCA network repair is installing, modifying, troubleshooting, and repairing basic controllers and networks. Here's a kind of a snapshot of sort of the key activities of each of these. And I don't need to read all of these out to you out loud, but I'll put them up here just for a few minutes. And then of course you'll have access to this presentation as well. Equipment repair, key activities, troubleshoot machines, repair, repair mechanical, electrical, install, move, or remove equipment. And Paul Perkins will be going in more detail on these. Again, network repair, install and maintain PLCs and PLC modules, So how are these certifications comprised? How are they made up, if you will? What is the model? So each of the 3 certifications that I've mentioned, first requires an e-learning component with a wonderful e-learning material developed by Amatrol. It also requires interacting, and this is really project-based learning at its most fantastic form, in the sense that the e-learning is interacting with the SkillBoss logistics device, which Paul will be describing here. And it's really project-based learning is one of the strongest ways to learn. And so it's a combination of both e-learning and hands-on skills on the SkillBoss logistics device. You must have both the e-learning and the SkillBoss logistics device to put anyone through any of these 3 certifications. So in terms of the assessment process, there are 2 assessments involved in earning each of these certifications. One is a 90 to 120-minute written assessment online based on the e-learning. And the second is a hands-on performance-based assessment using the Amatrol SkillBoss logistics device. Now, we also will have CTSCA instructor training. Master training sessions will be held at Amatrol. What we're hoping is to have the master trainers go back to their different sections or regions in the country, and at a local level be able to provide instructor training to the CTSCA instructors in their region. So hopefully building a local network of instructors throughout the country. So what is the value for a SkillBoss device? We have 2. We have our SkillBoss Production for our Certified Production Technician Plus hands-on program. And we have the SkillBoss Logistics device, which Paul Perkins will be describing here shortly. So remember, we have to maintain the highest quality assurance. Because we have close to 1,780 assessment and training centers in all 50 states, we have anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 certificates going through our program every month. So we have to maintain a high level of quality. We have to be able to replicate that quality all around the country. So we had to choose one device and one set of e-learning to go through and offer this quality and maintaining that quality throughout the entire country. So we were very fortunate, of course, to partner with Amatrol on the SkillBoss logistics device, and we're able to replicate the same quality of training and assessment throughout the entire country. This also goes back to our ISO 17024 requirement for quality assurance, and also to maintain the same level of instructor training and very consistent delivery of our assessments. So the national certification increases, sorry, I have something in my way here. So one of the advantages to the system that we have in the SkillBoss logistics device is that it makes technician training accessible to a much larger number of schools, company training centers, and also there's a lot of talk these days about equitable programs, equity, rural and urban areas. This SkillBoss logistics device can sit on a table. It'll actually be built on and come with a table. It is portable, it is heavy, but it can be portable, and it allows for a learning experience at a very nominal cost. And I say that, and it's not without cost, but if you look at the costs involved in building, let's say, a full manufacturing training lab with, Haas machines, industrial, welding equipment, hydraulics, pneumatics, PLC training, and so forth, you're looking at several $1 million. We're able, with this one device, to provide for the most sophisticated hands-on and e-learning experience combined with 3 certifications at a local level, and for schools that would not otherwise have several $1 million to offer this kind of really advanced training for these supply chain distribution centers throughout the country. Again, we've already been implementing our Certified Production Technician Plus SkillBoss production device throughout the country. This is an idea of what our we call SkillBoss manufacturing device looks like. And you can see it's run by a PLC. This is a polishing device. It allows students multiple learning experience and covers a lot of the elements of and basics of mechatronics. So our students can not only get excited in a classroom environment about these career paths, but it prepares them for much higher level learning to go on to, let's say, get an AS degree in mechatronics or welding or machining and build on their career path. But really what we're doing so well with these, both the SkillBoss Logistics program and CTSCA, is we're preparing people for success in these career paths and really the very beginning of a career path that can go on to higher and higher levels. So this is my contact information. And on that said, I'd like to turn this over to Paul Perkins. And thank you, Amatrol, once again, for a fantastic collaboration. And this has both taken many years with NCSCA and Amatrol. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Neil. And as Neil mentioned, SkillBoss Logistics is the device for assessing the hands-on skills in the CTSCA certification. Everyone who gets certified has to test out on this device to ensure that we have consistency in the evaluation. The ultimate goal, of course, is to ensure that individuals can actually do the tasks they'll be expected to do on the job. SkillBoss also has a second purpose, and that is to serve as the training device to enable individuals to learn the skills on which they'll be assessed. The development of SkillBoss has been an extensive process, and in fact, it's taken about 2 years, but I can truly say it's been a team effort, and we've had leadership from 5 key organizations, including those that you see here, which are some of the ones that Steve and Neil mentioned: the National Center for Supply Chain Automation in California, MSSC in Virginia, the Material Handling Equipment Distributors Association, or MAHITA, in Illinois, the Material Handling Institute, MHI, in North Carolina, and finally Amatrol in Indiana. And this group not only created the vision for the device, but also played a key role in engaging industry experts from the memberships of MHI and MAHITA and their many industrial contacts that they had across their network. And so we ultimately assembled a who's who of the supply chain industry with some iconic names. Some of the ones that Steve already showed you were companies that got engaged in the development of the SkillBoss device, and they provided expert advisors to shape the design of SkillBoss and the skills it addresses. And I can't thank the companies and the people that participated in the process enough for what they did, because they spent countless hours reviewing and testing ideas and finally prototypes, and even coming in for several weeks at a time to test the device and make sure it actually did what we had, what we intended it to do. So the result was the device that you see in the lower left-hand corner of the slide here, and it's a working tabletop size sortation system. And even though it's compact, SkillBoss uses the same technologies and techniques used in large-scale sortation systems, like the systems that you see on the right side of this slide. And it was really quite a challenge, because to bring the size of these systems down to something that could fit on a tabletop and not lose the industry feel of it, there were a lot of special components that we had to source, and even some that we had to make from rollers and other devices, and they're just pieces that aren't made in that size. But our designers were able to accomplish that, and the help that we got from the expert advisors really made a difference. So on SkillBoss, packages are inducted, scanned, routed to multiple conveyors, and then sorted into 3 destination chutes. And if there's a bad scan, they're sent to a rework station. And the skills that students learn on the system or are assessed on are not only applicable to sortation systems. We also made an extra effort to include a wide range of technologies on SkillBoss to make sure that what students are learning and being assessed on applies not only to sortation systems, but other types of supply chain automation. The skills that the students learn on SkillBoss are aligned with 3 CTSCA certification tests, which Neil listed here shortly before. And to learn the skills, we've developed 3 online courses. And as you see here, the courses are titled the same as the certifications. Course 1 is equipment maintenance. Course 2 is equipment repair. Course 3 is network repair. So these courses not only prepare individuals for the CTSCA hands-on assessments, they actually prepare them for the online certification test. And each course is about 150 hours, which includes the time to learn the multimedia content and also to do the hands-on skills on SkillBoss. This next slide shows some examples of some of the screens from the online courses. And as you can see, they're truly multimedia courses with animations, 3D graphics, voice and text, and also they're highly interactive. They're not just page turners. The courses have also been designed to specifically focus on the technology of supply chain automation. And this means students can go through these courses faster than if they were taking traditional maintenance courses that are being offered by many colleges across the country today, which might have similar content, but they cover more than what's needed for the supply chain industry. And I think this feature makes these courses ideal for workforce development and in-plant training, where the learning time is critical. The courses also feature simulators, so students can practice the hands-on skills online in addition to using SkillBoss. And this slide shows some examples of our simulators, which cover fundamentals such as electricity, motor control, pneumatics, and PLCs. We call these simulators virtual trainers because they allow individuals to perform the same skills they would perform on actual industrial training equipment. What makes them special, though, is that, and I think makes them more realistic, is that we have designed them so they have all the same behaviors that the actual devices do. So when students are hooking up circuits or writing a program or making an adjustment, they can make the same mistakes in the virtual trainers as they would on the real equipment. So they get to see the results and learn from it. Once students have learned the concepts through the online courses and virtual trainers, they're ready to practice their skills on SkillBoss. And the hands-on learning, I think, goes a lot quicker as a result of having gone through these virtual trainers. So we've developed approximately 100 skills that align with the CTSCA certification that we can perform on SkillBoss. They're organized into the 3 groups that align with the 3 online courses, which align with the 3 certifications. So in course 1, individuals practice skills such as system operation, safety, preventive maintenance, lubrication, and machine adjustments. Those are all the entry-level skills that somebody would perform if they're coming into an entry-level maintenance type of job. In course 2, they start to learn about installation and troubleshooting, focusing on the electromechanical devices, which include things such as fluid power, DC and AC motors, mechanical power transmission. And then finally, course 3 is the capstone, and it really is the companion to course 2 because there they add a learning of installation and troubleshooting of controllers, networks, scanners, and really work with the entire system. The components of SkillBoss are contained in 3 major elements that you see here. There's an HMI, which runs a warehouse control software, which people in the industry call a WCS. There's a control unit with a PLC, Ethernet network, and a variable frequency drive, as well as other electromechanical components. And finally, the workstation itself, which includes multiple types of conveyors, sensors, actuators, and a barcode scanner. So all these elements work together to recreate a sortation system just as you would find in a distribution center. To go a little deeper, this layout shows the components as they are arranged on the workstation. And I know there's a lot to digest here, but I'll just walk you through it. The packages enter the system at an induction roller conveyor shown in the lower right corner of the slide here. And this conveyor queues the packages up for the system and then acts as a metering device to control the package gap. Packages are then transported to a second conveyor called an induction belt conveyor, and its function is to actually pass the packages through a 2D barcode reader. If the package scan is bad, there's a vertical sorter conveyor located just to the left of the induction belt conveyor, and it actually lifts up and passes the package to a recirculation conveyor located on an upper level. Packages on the recirculation conveyor stop at a rework station where a problem can be corrected, and then the package is released and it's passed to a gravity slide, and it slides back down, rejoins the induction belt conveyor, and goes back through the barcode scanner again. If the package scan is good, the vertical sorter remains horizontal and passes the package to the distribution conveyor on the lower level of the system. To track packages along the distribution conveyor, the PLC uses an encoder. This is used to determine when to shunt each package into one of the 3 discharge chutes. The distribution conveyor has 3 types of diverters which shunt the packages into the chutes. There's a pusher, there's a bow arm sorter, and there's a 2-axis pick and place manipulator. So these are 3 of a number of types of diverters that are used in industry today. So now that I've described the overall operation, let's watch a short video so you can actually see the device in action. And before I start the video, let me point out a couple of things. First of all, you'll see on the screen that there are two PC screens. There's one on the left that shows a Fault Pro screen. That's actually a fault insertion software that we've developed that inserts faults into the system to teach troubleshooting. And I'll talk more about that a little later. And then on the right screen, you'll see a picture of the 3D picture of the workstation. And that is actually one of the screens from the warehouse control software that actually controls the system. And then finally, you'll notice over on the right-hand side, the control unit. And it's a standard industry enclosure with lockout tagout. It's got a disconnect switch, has a control start stop, and other safety devices that are typical of what you found in industry. So we've tried to create a system that looks and feels as much like people are going to see when they actually go out on the job. So let's play the video, and as you'll see it panning across, you'll see a few guards. Each of these guards has a safety switch on it so that if it's removed, the system stops, just like you'd find in industry. And then we're going to start over here on the right, and you'll see packages being placed on the induction roller conveyor, and you can see the gap being set. They're now going down the belt conveyor, being scanned by the barcode reader. If it's a good scan, they stay on the vertical sorter conveyor and get passed to the conveyor on the back, which is the distribution conveyor. If it's a bad scan, it goes up to the recirculation conveyor and then comes over, gets stopped at a rework station. In this case, it's a barcode label that was on the flipped over. So it was replaced or fixed and then operated and I'm going to stop the video for just a second. And so the gravity slide allows the boxes or packages to rejoin the induction belt conveyor, get rescanned, and then if they're good scans, they come over on the conveyor that you're seeing here, and you can see 3 chutes, and each of the chutes has a different type of sorter or diverter that I mentioned. And what we're seeing is the actual operation of those various diverters. So this is the 2-axis pick and place, and the one on the right was the bow arm sorter. Now we're seeing somebody operate or navigate through some of the screens of the warehouse control software. You can see it's a touch screen display, so it's very easy to use. And then they operated the Fault Pro software, and that's where they would go into a troubleshooting exercise. So the system, I think, is really easy to use, but the learning that it provides is truly extensive. So if you examine SkillBoss up close, you'll notice that it has a wide array of components. And as I mentioned earlier, the purpose is to make sure that individuals are being exposed to as many different components as they're going to see on any kind of device that they might find in supply chain automation. And to give some examples that are noted here on the screen, we have a variety of input sensors, magnetic read sensors, inductive sensor, 3 types of photoelectric sensors, even a limit switch. We have 3 types of AC and DC motors. The PLC has discrete and analog I/O, a high-speed counter, Ethernet. In the mechanical area, we have different types of bearings, belts, chains, a variety of mechanical components that they're going to see when they go out into any type of distribution center. And as I mentioned previously, the warehouse control software, these are some examples of screens of what it has, and it is capable of monitoring and controlling the entire system. And we actually developed this in-house because they're generally matched to the specific system they're used for. But we looked at a lot of different systems across the country with the help of our industry advisors and actually developed a software that is a combination of warehouse management software, warehouse control software, and conveyor control software. And actually all 3 of these are often used in distribution centers to control the entire system. And so it's really a very, very powerful system with alarms and order entry and many different types of operations. So up to this point, I've shown you the elements of SkillBoss that make it operate. What I'd like to do now is talk about the part of the system that's designed to make it not operate. And this is actually the most important feature of the system because it enables individuals to learn and assess their troubleshooting skills. To accomplish this objective, we've used a computer-based fault insertion system called FaultPro. And FaultPro consists of an electronic circuit board and software that inserts faults into the system, and it tracks the student's troubleshooting activity. And we've actually created over 50 different faults in the SkillBoss system for FaultPro to be able to insert. And you can see examples on the left of some of the types of faults. It can put faults into sensors and valves, motors, controllers, the scanner, the VFD, pretty much all parts of the system. And the goal is to make sure that it presents the symptoms with more than one possible cause, so students have a real-life troubleshooting experience. So to start a troubleshooting exercise, students select from a menu tree like you see on the FaultPro screen on the right side of this slide, and they select from two different modes. One mode is a single fault mode, and the other is a random fault mode, and you can see the two buttons up here on the right side of that screen that identify those. So in the single fault mode, faults are inserted manually by the student to learn the behavior and how to test for each fault. And then in the random fault mode, faults are inserted automatically by the software, and the student is challenged to locate the specific fault. Students don't know what the fault that is that's been inserted by the computer, so they have to use a troubleshooting methodology, starting with symptom identification to isolate the problem to the specific fault. And in this random fault mode, the FaultPro software tracks the troubleshooting process, including the number of correct and incorrect answers and time to solve. So using a computerized method of inserting faults like this has a lot of benefits. One, and most obvious is that you're solving world problems, that you're getting a rich troubleshooting experience where the students are doing it firsthand. They're not just having a teacher demonstrate a few examples. Second advantage, I think, is that it's safe. We've designed it so that it won't hurt the student and it won't hurt the equipment. And a lot of times when people put faults into systems, they easily tear up wiring or do something that creates more problems than they were expecting. Thirdly, it's automated. Students can use both modes without teacher intervention. So teachers don't have to babysit the student when they're learning or testing the troubleshooting process. And then finally, with the system actually creates a database. So it's a record of the students' work that they've done, and so that it can be used to try and help improve students' troubleshooting skills. Being good at troubleshooting isn't just about being able to find a fault. It's about being able to do it quickly. And probably that's the most important thing, is that if you can't do it in a short amount of time, it gets to be very expensive for the distribution center. And this database gives teachers a way to measure that so that they can help students find the path to being able to master their troubleshooting process. So as you might expect, teachers have much to learn to teach and certify individuals in the CTSCA certifications and SkillBoss. To make it a success, we've developed a master teacher training course. And as Neil mentioned earlier, it's initially going to be held in Amatrol in Indiana starting in the fall, but the goal is to get it pushed out into the various regions. And the course is going to be designed to teach teachers how to implement the certification, how to work with the online courses, and to become thoroughly familiar with the SkillBoss logistics device. It's a week-long course with pre-work using the online courses. So we, with the goal that they can come to class already being able to focus on the hands-on part of the training, which is the one thing that they can't do anywhere else. So that's what I have to share about SkillBoss Logistics. If you have any questions, we will have a Q&A session here very shortly following Steve's wrap-up. And after the webinar, if you want to reach out to me, here's my email address. And now I'd like to turn it back to Steve to wrap up. Steve?
So, hi, so what's next? To provide a little bit of additional insight, there are 7 pilot programs that are in the queue right now at varying schools in different parts of the country. A list of those schools is on the left. There's many more schools that are going to be added going forward. If you're an industry executive with an interest in connecting with one of these schools, to support their program, to learn more, and to try to get involved in the upskilling of technicians, send me a message. Now it's time for the Q&A session. Paul, I want to ask you the first question, if I could. One came up, it's the ratio of students to the device. Somebody presented a question that said he has a 25 student classroom, and how many devices would be practical, recognizing there's a lot of e-learning involved?
That's a really good question, Steve. A lot of the skills involve working with different pieces and parts of the system. I don't know that at various times, more students could be on the system than at other times. If somebody's doing a troubleshooting exercise, it probably becomes a 1 or 2 student training station. But when they're working on different parts, like there are skills for adjusting a sensor, or maybe skills for changing out a belt. So I think you could have as many as 4 to 6 students working on it at one time. And as you pointed out, the virtual trainers provide a tremendous amount of expansion of that space. And also some of the skills that they're performing on SkillBoss, they could perform on other training devices that they might have in the lab. So if they had a pneumatics trainer, they may do something on the pneumatics trainer that parallels what they're doing on SkillBoss, and that would provide some additional training as well. But with a class of 25, having more than one device would certainly be of high value. And I think that if they also have some auxiliary training devices, that would support that class very well.
Great, thank you, Paul. And recognizing that the SkillBoss logistics device is both for education and training, as well as skill assessment. So if MSSC is involved in an assessment part of earning a certification, that's going to be, the device will be dedicated to that student or to that person trying to earn the certification, which is a little different than a broader learning environment. So, and then the other question that came in, Paul, one other question that came in was the question of the footprint, kind of how much space is required for all the elements of the device.
That's the good news. At least from my perspective anyway, when I look at systems in a real distribution center, it still marvels. I find a marvel that they fit this into a 34-inch by 96-inch space. So that's a pretty, about 8 foot by 34 inches is what you need. And you really don't need much, just the walk around room that you would have around that.
Great, great. And there's toward the end, you shared a slide related to the Master Trainer Training Program. And Neil, if you could talk a little bit about the strategy of, I know MSSC has assessment centers and partners all across the country, and I think 49 states. What sort of a vision does MSSC have for getting the master trainer training sites in different parts of the country, recognizing that as we go forward, not everybody can travel to Amatrol for master trainer training? Paul, if you want to field that.
Yeah, hi there. I think, can you hear me now, Steve?
There we go. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I've been muted there. So our goal and our dream, if you will, is to have regional training centers, whether those be mostly at technical and community colleges. And I know it looks like we already have several in place that we're participating in the whole NSF ATE National Center program that have been working with you, Steve. And the ideal is that within either one region or multiple regions in a state, obviously depending on the size of the state, that the community and technical colleges that are offering, let's say, the master training for the SkillBoss, the CTSTA program, would offer face-to-face training for instructors in their area. So at regional, other technical and community colleges, we hope one of these might be able to be offered in high schools, maybe equipment maintenance. We're not sure yet. It's a very high level. But the instructor training would actually be done at a regional, local level. And Amatrol's, of course, job would be to train these train the trainers, if you will, originally at the Amatrol location. And then once they're trained as master trainers, they can go out. And we're expecting actually instructor training for each one of these certifications. Each one of these certifications is 100, looking at probably at least 170 hours. So, each one of these, whether it's equipment maintenance, repair, network repair, would require its own instructor training. If there were another, let's say, community or technical college in the region that wanted let's say a 5-day training to go through all three with an instructor in that area, that master training center that has gone through the Amatrol master training would help those regional schools. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Neil. And we're getting some questions about, is CPT a prerequisite to CTSCA?
No, it is not.
Okay.
We would recommend safety and quality possibly as recommended, but it is not, no.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question that came in related to, obviously with COVID in front of us and the ever evolving changes with students going to school and in instructors being in the classroom, questions come up about kind of online master trainer training and kind of what's the plan. I know there'll be some training of a master trainer at Amatrol in the fall, but some schools or some instructors might not be able to board an airplane and come to that. If you're regional, obviously you can drive in, or companies who want to send people in can send people in. But maybe Paul, if you could speak to that.
Yes, there's, I think, a couple of ways that we can handle that. One, we certainly had envisioned that after the initial training that we would have some of the regional training centers set up around the country where people could go there. Another option that we plan to offer, and we've actually been doing work on this summer. We run teacher training classes for a lot of different technologies over the years. They've all been in person. This year we realized that was going to be a challenge. And so we invested in a significant amount of distance learning technology. And so we're actually running hybrid classes where we have a class here and we may have 2 to 6 people in a large room. They're all distanced with individual pieces of equipment. And we're planning to do this for Skill Boss as well. When the training starts up, is we'll have separate training units for each person that is here in person. But if somebody has the equipment at their lab, they could actually go through the class in a remote learning operation where they're actually connected in through distance learning to our instructor and able to just do their activity right there. And we have 2-way visuals so that we can see what they're doing. So there are ways to be able to do it. It obviously takes the hands-on capability has to be there local wherever they're going through the training.
Great. Paul, and real quick, we have about 1 more minute for Q&A. A quick question about the power requirement. What is the power requirement for the device?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. So I needed Mike to do that. Thank you, Mike. Power requirements, it's single phase and it can run on, if it's international, it can run on 230, 50, or if it's domestic here, it'd be 120, 60, and the total amps are within a 20 amp circuit breaker.
Great, thank you so much. With that said, we're wrapping up today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out a survey immediately following, which will give you an opportunity, if you're an academic, to submit a little bit of your information, contact information for follow-up by the National Center. And also, if you're an industry person with an interest in engaging the center at a broader level, you have that opportunity as well. But it's a quick 1 or 2 minute survey response. We appreciate that. And then in general, the webinar data and the PowerPoints, we've had a lot of questions about that. And the PowerPoints will be available in the days to come. It'll take us a couple of days to turn this around because we are going to be editing and putting closed captioning onto the video, into the video itself of the webinar. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for participating in supporting the National Center, MSSC, and Amatrol in this webinar to educate you about kind of next generation workforce certification. Thank you so much, and we look forward to collaborating and working with you in the future.
Attendees join me in